And with me, I'm joined by Ade Animashahun, and he's the Managing Director at Investec Asset Management. Now, this is the 19th World Economic Forum, and the theme for the forum is implications of the global economic crisis on Africa. Now, in light of the global economic slowdown, do you think investors are reconsidering investing into the continent?
Well, thanks very much. It depends on the kind of investor you're talking about. For the long-term investors, in fact, we are beginning to see opportunities in Africa. Values are beginning to reappear, so we're committing more money to the continent. For short-term investors, obviously, they might have a reason to, or reasons to look at what they have been doing and how they do it. But for those of us that are long-term investors, we are seeing new opportunities.
When it comes to those specific opportunities, are there specific sectors? I mean, we're looking at telecoms, mining, or just kind of give us your opinion on where people are putting their money.
Obviously, mining is, Africa has a lot of resources, and China is beginning to consume again. I'm sure you saw that there's a sort of a decline in the consumption of resources globally. China is coming back, but for us, we begin to see value in financial services, banking in particular, and fast-moving consumer goods. You will always sort of see opportunities in those sectors, and cement infrastructure consumption, or proxy for infrastructure, as we call it. We believe there are opportunities resurfacing in those areas.
Now, in terms of the challenges to investing on the continent, look at sentiment, look at ideas and perceptions about investing. Do you think that has changed over time as information has gone out?
We made a lot of progress in Africa over the last few years. Obviously, there are challenges here and there in a number of countries. But I think in terms of sentiment, the view of risk in Africa has changed tremendously. People are beginning to be more comfortable. I mean, you saw until last year, we saw a big increase in the amount of portfolio flows into Africa, direct foreign investment. So I think things have changed for the better.
When it comes to that specific risk, are investors now realizing that if they invest in Africa, they can get a far larger return if they're willing to take that initial risk?
You have to be careful about that. It's about risk-adjusted return and diversification of portfolios. I think there's a better understanding of how to sort of compute risk in Africa, unlike before. So people are now sort of more holistic in the way they look at risk in Africa.
Now, the theme of the forum, as I mentioned earlier, is implications of the global economic slowdown on Africa. How do you think we will fare as a continent in terms of our recovery? Well,
the theory of decoupling has been sort of repudiated one way or the other. So we're going to be affected. There's no doubt about that. It's the extent to which we are affected we need to look at. In fact, I thought Africa wouldn't be as affected as we've seen. But given that development is coming back, given that consumption of resources are coming back, given that confidence is returning to the continent, I think the impact is beginning to sort of dissipate.
Do you think in light of the global economic slowdown, it's given Africa an opportunity to reposition itself because, as it were, the playing fields have been leveled somewhat?
I wouldn't say leveled. I wouldn't say leveled. The Europeans are still subsidizing agriculture. You've seen a lot of subsidies in Europe and in America as well. So, in fact, the play field is not level at all. We haven't got the kind of resources that have been deployed in those other countries. But I think this has given us a lot of sort of rethink to do, in the sense that we need to diversify our economies. We need to get our infrastructure right. If you don't get the infrastructure right, nothing ain't going to happen. So getting the infrastructure right is fundamental to the growth of Africa.
And speaking of that growth, in light of shrinking FDI into the continent, how can we otherwise facilitate the development of infrastructure spend on the continent?
I think the money is out there. The money is out there. It's about getting the reforms right. It's about getting the sort of the environment right. I think I used to say rule of law, rule of law, rule of law. If you get the environment right in Africa, and you get all the laws in there, and the reforms take place, and the leaders are committed into making things happen, the money will come.
And what's your take-home factor for this year's World Economic Forum? What are you hoping will be brought to the table in terms of discussions and way forwards?
I think it's about sort of getting capital back into Africa, getting people to come into Africa, getting Africa leaders to see that a lot of work has to be done to get the country back into the kind of growth trajectory one would like to see.